to order at 4:35 p.m. Thank you, Councilor Hightower and Councilor McGee for accommodating this early start so that we can fit everything in tonight. Busy night ahead in municipal government. And it starts with this meeting. So the first item on the agenda is the agenda. I welcome motion for proposed amendments.
Move to adopt the agenda as amended with a final version of the agenda posted by CEO.
Excellent.
Second.
Second by Councilor McGee. Thank you. Any discussion of the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and we have an agenda. We are on 2.1, the public forum, and is there any member of the public that to speak to the board? Seeing none, you do appear. Mercy, Councilor Sharon Busher has her hand raised online, and Sharon, you should be able to address the Board of Finance now.
Right. Yes, I've unmuted. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a member of the public, I really look forward to the final budget being discussed by the Board of Finance. And so this comment is not so much for the mayor, but it is for him because it's the Board of Finance is his committee. That I understood the reason that the meeting on the 20th got canceled, but I really feel that it's really important for the public to understand that the people that are overseeing the overall recommendation of the budget to the full council that ultimately gets adopted tonight have a chance to do that critical eyeball at the end. And I'm just saying that, hoping that in the future, if a meeting gets canceled, another would be scheduled. So there would be that discussion. I think it's an important discussion. Because a lot of time was spent on the police department, but I feel like there are other important services that get delivered to the community by Parks and Rec, by DPW. Some of these services have fees that need to be affordable, and I just feel that I would have benefited from hearing that conversation and understanding that the elected officials were looking out for us. So that's number one. The second thing is, because I know you've got a lengthy night, the second thing is that I continue to be concerned about the community issue with the affordability of the high school and the amount that we as a city can offer for them to bond and the gap. And I look forward to hearing the community discuss it and maybe even the council discuss it, because I understand it's in the school board's realm, but it is our community's realm. So thank you again for your time and good luck tonight.
Great. Thank you, Sharon. Are there any other members of the public that wish to speak to the Board of Finance? Do you see, looking at the attendees, if an attendee wants to be recognized, please raise your hand now. And okay, Jeremy Farkas, do you want to speak at this stage as a member of the public, or are you raising your hand to be part of the?
Just raising my hand to make sure you see that I'm here, and if there's anything I can do when we get item 4.05, I'm available to answer questions.
Awesome, excellent, thank you. And there are other members of the airport team here for that purpose as well. So I am going to close the public forum and move to the consent agenda. We don't always have we actually rarely have a consent agenda at the Board of Finance, but given the large number of items we were attempting to work through tonight, we thought that it was prudent to attempt to do it this way. Catherine, could you maybe just share with the board what you shared with me this morning about how you organized this consent agenda, which items went on to the consent agenda?
Yes, the items that went on to the consent agenda are leases that have no changes, amendments, budget neutral amendments, as well as reclassifications and grants, and the one city council initiative fund request. And that is the criteria that I use. Everything else is on the deliberative agenda. Many items on the consent agenda.
Excellent. So that's how we came to this consent agenda. Are we ready for a motion regarding the consent agenda?
Thank you. Motion to adopt the consent agenda and take the actions indicated.
Thank you. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Second by Councilor McKee. Further discussion of the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Are any opposed? Motion carries unanimously and adopt the consent agenda. Thank you to the board for working with us in this way. That brings us straight to 4.01, which is a grant acceptance for repairs and maintenance of the Church Marketplace. This is a very positive item. It'll allow us to get some important work done using federal dollars. And, in the interest of time, given that we still, despite the consent agenda, still have 15 more items, so I'm gonna not ask for summaries. The board should still request information that you need to make a decision, not trying to rush this along. Skip the summaries. And so the floor is open for questions for regarding this item through 4.01. Go ahead, Councilor Hightower.
Sorry, because the memo is a little bit brief. I know that this came through the congressional funding, but just curious as to why we prioritize this in terms of what we could have gotten funding prior to we asked for it.
We did ask for it, yeah.
And so, and some of more detail to what it's going to do.
Sure, of course. So as you know, the marketplace does not have access to the general fund. So we do actually have a lot of deferred maintenance on the street, including related to weather and our climate. So we have a lot of frost heaves, we have some cracked bricks, we have some leveling that needs to be done. So having bricks removed, resurfacing, putting the bricks back on, just to make it accessible for everyone.
I just wanted to, we did ask for and receive lots of other congressional directed. This is, I think it's fair to say that Center Ladies has a historic relationship with the marketplace and invited request in this area. I thought you'd be very successful. You'd be successful in delivering funding and has been. I think as Karen notes, capital investment on the marketplace has always been a challenge, and this is one from my perspective. Any further discussion of 4.01? Go ahead.
I move to approve and recommend that the city council authorize the grant acceptance as recommended on 4.
Great, the motion has been made and seconded. Any final discussion of 4.01? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And we will move to 4.02. Thank you, Kara. Which is a request for authorization to enter into a non-signatory airline lease agreement with Sun Country Inc. Sun Country, of course, is one of the just started a relationship with Sun Country. I understand that it's unusual for a new airline to want to move so quickly to kind of formalize the agreement with some lease in this way. And this is, we're excited about this.
Excited and shows their commitment that they do want us to have a sustainable relationship with us. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Questions? The floor is open for questions or a motion from the board.
Move to approve and recommend the authorization as recommended on 4 docs.
Second.
Excellent. Further discussion? Seeing none, we will go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 4.02 carries. unanimously, thank you. We're now moving to 4.03, which is a contract for the engineering and bidding services with Casero Associates for the North Terminal second floor renovations. The floor is open on 4.03. President Paul.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to approve and take the action as recommended. on documents.
Any further discussion? Motion carries. Sorry. There you go. No further discussion with that. We will go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion does carry unanimously. And this brings us, thank you, Nick and Shelby. This brings us to 4.04, which is the Aviation Director Market Center adjustment. This is action we're recommending to take to strengthen the search process that is underway. Floor is open.
I'll move to recommend that the city council approve the classification as recommended on board docs.
Thank you, Councilor Hector. Is there a second? Seconded by President Paul. Great. Appreciate that we have this on the floor and that it's before us. From my perspective, this is an issue that there's been concern about the compensation for this position for many years, going back to when I served on the airport commission. There were questions back the last time we did an open search for this position back in 2008, 2009, and I think this action would help address that. I appreciate the openness to considering it. Floor is open for further questions or Councilor Paul, President Paul.
Thank you. The only thing that I would say about this, I mean, I think that it is important that we have a valid compensation range, and we have not attracted a lot of candidates for this position as of yet. I do think that there should be, as much as we can possibly do it, a formalized process that we do this in the right order. And it seems to me that before we go and post a position and then find out that we're not getting candidates and then do the market factor adjustment, that we should try to be doing the market factor adjustment first. So that when we are attracting candidates, we're hopefully being more efficient with the bid term. So it's neither here nor there for this process, but we're going to have others in the very near future. And I hope that we will try to do it in that order, or at least have a stated process for how we do this. And we don't see Karen here, but thanks very much to the HR staff for this one.
Great. Thank you, President Paul. Certainly understand the point and to a certain degree agree with it. Certainly, it's true that there is no set process, and often we've had feedback to the contrary from various perspectives that there's a preference to see what kind of response we get to position postings before making a decision like this. So it's can be, can and has been argued both ways, but certainly, and certainly we find ourselves in this situation frequently. I mean, separate from director level positions where we seek to make a change after we've had a period of not having a successful advertising period. So I think there certainly is not an uncommon position to be in, but I take the point and certainly open to some kind of discussion about if there is at least to explore whether we could come to some formalized agreement with the council about how to try to do this, particularly with ones that require council ultimately council approvals. With that, are we ready for vote? Councilor Jen.
Yes, I completely Councilor Paul for that. Seems that may spoke to that. I was just wondering if with the previous salary, if it was applicants and how if they raise this.
We have received 3 applicants from qualified individuals, which is a smaller number than we'd like. It's also a less diverse pool than we would like. As many different perspectives and backgrounds represented. So also, while we may certainly might be able to hire someone initially without making this change, something that a point that has been made by our consultants. A concern, a risk is that if we are successful at hiring someone, if we are below market as we believe we are, there is a risk of the person not staying very long and after a short period of time here, if we receive a much higher offer from another competing airport, that that's not good for the institution either. So this is a step I support. Hope that the board will as well. Councilor Hightower.
Just to say that I agree with Councilor Hall, and I think at least doing the analysis before and getting the authorization to bump the cap if you have to, so that you can do it as part of the same cycle instead of needing to keep it up or having the few candidates we did have waiting would be maybe a compromise between either or the argument.
Point taken. Appreciate that. Okay, if there are no further comments, you have a duly moved item. We will go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Recommendation will be made to the full council. That brings us to important item 4.05. We're all important items, but this one we have a big team here to discuss and on the line if needed. This is a request to execute an amendment to the license agreement with Beta Technologies Inc. for the continuation of earthwork to create a developable area at the Burlington International Airport. I would like to make an exception to my management proposal for this meeting for there to be just, especially if there are other members of the public at home, I think it's important to set the context a little bit for what is happening with this item and how this follows on the prior action of the council, so how it integrates with the action we expect the council will be taking shortly. So perfect. Great.
So this agreement or this license extension that you're looking at today is with Beta Technologies, who we've of course been working with for many, many months. They are set up with a headquarters building currently at Burlington Airport. They've expanded that building extensively, and they are now looking at their next site, which is this particular proposed property, which is the manufacturing site for their electric aircraft mission. This site has been under construction with earthwork, a lot of dirt, a significant amount of dirt being moved around in preparation for their overall plan to build that manufacturing site. What we're asking for tonight is an extension of that earthworks package to the end of July of this year, and also include additional steps to undertake. Those additional steps include some concrete work, some utility work, and roadway construction. If you remember last time when we presented this, there was significant benefit to the city and to the airport because we have not signed a lease yet with Beta, but there's significant benefit to the airport because of this work being performed by Beta that would stay with the site that benefits the airport ultimately. There is risk associated with Beta, but Beta certainly understands and knows that because we are so very close to settling our negotiations on the overall lease agreement. In fact, later tonight, we're going to be presenting at an executive session at City Council where we are and expecting to bring that lease agreement, not license, lease agreement to the City Council in the July meeting. The site has not changed. It is the same site that we went forward with at the end of November. That site does not change. We continue to work with many of those tenants that are called the Valley tenants. We've actually brought a couple of those tenant agreements to you over the last several months for an extended lease agreement. We are continuing to work with some of those, one of those tenants right now, Mansfield Healthlight, but I feel very well in tune that eventually this summer will be very hopeful to bring something back to the City Council and Board of Finance with that particular tenant. I think that sums it up.
Very good. Great, fun to leave it there. I guess I just added, I appreciate the work that you and the rest of the city team have done to, I guess, the point where we think we are on the cusp of executing this major agreement with Data Technologies for an extended ground lease. We will be briefing the City Council executive session about where that negotiation stands later this evening. And I think this is a important step. You know, I think probably everyone has some sense of when you have a major construction project underway to stop for a 3-week period, waiting for final agreement to be created would create major challenges and unnecessary additional expenses. And so this is a interim step where the risks are really being taken by Beta of taking this step is I think an important step that has been proposed that Beta is willing to take so we can properly work through with the council, the executive session tonight, and hopefully the final ground lease approval on the 18th. With that, floor is open for questions.
I feel like I've asked this question before, but just checking. So maybe it was for the previous action you talked about. At some point when we talked about leases in the airport, there were a lot of tenants who were really unhappy. And I guess my question is this part of making them more unhappy? Is because I think they were worried about the expansion of Beta and what that meant for their own leases. So I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about how the other tenants are viewing this.
Yeah, and that's a great question, and I'll throw just a little bit of context of the presentation in November. There was no official map associated with that presentation, and there was some assumptions that Beta was going to be occupying a much larger footprint on existing tenant space. There is some overlap, and that's some of the negotiation that's happening with one particular tenant, but the rest of the tenants are very happy in the valley, and those are the aviation or aeronautical tenants that we're working with today. Flight Academy, there's great, huge developments with the Burlington Technical Center and their aviation program that we're also working with the school district on in that general vicinity, as well as the Hangar Condo Associates. So I would say that the relationships with those particular tenants are very different than what they were in November and solidified with an extended period lease on their existing footprint. There are non-aeronautical tenants that we have had to vacate from the properties, but there's also federal regulations that stipulate if the property was purchased with federal funds, specifically FAA, federal aviation funds, aeronautical entities have the preferential lease rights to that particular area. And there's much greater benefits of Beta development in this particular site and overall aesthetic and development opportunities on that particular site versus what we had before. Those were really the only tenants, those valley tenants. The remainder, and those are a small portion of our tenants as well, our general aviation tenants. We have dozens of other tenants across the airfield that we're working with on a greater master plan and other opportunities at the airport in alternative locations.
I do think that it's hard to vote on this when we don't have a list of those tenants. Not that I don't trust you like at your board, but I think it's hard to say yes to this when we haven't seen the other side of that's not part of this presentation.
That's right, Tyler. I think I understand your question, your concern. I think you should, I would submit their as Nick stated, the time of the last discussion, there's a lot of moving parts at the time, and airport was basically unable in advance of that action to kind of fully confirm and communicate with tenants exactly what their status would be. That has been, you're in a very different place now, from my perspective, all the tenants except for one tenant, Mansfield Health Light, that has a very specific situation that is not impacted by this license agreement. I think it's fair to say, and then we have to have an ongoing negotiation with them. There's something to dispute there. I think it's become clear. It's unclear. They essentially let their lease lapse, and we are open to renewal of it. And that is being worked through. So some very specific situation with that tenant. That the other tenants, many of them at that point, they now have long-term agreements. And I think if there were any kind of outstanding concerns about the action you're taking tonight, this has been quite public. And there's been a lot of attention on what's been happening here. I think if there were lingering concerns, you'd be hearing it tonight. I'm not aware of any of the other consultants. Is Jeff Glassberg on the line?
Jeff is not, he will be later tonight.
Yeah, later.
And
I
Jeremy.
mean, is that, I might be on a little over my skis here, but I'm not aware of any, other than Mansfield Health Light situation. Is there any other tenant dispute?
No, you specifically in that area, no.
Or not even dispute, concern about this license action extension?
Besides Mansfield Health Light, no. The
Including
other
the
tenants,
tenants that we did terminate.
The tenants we terminated, let's be clear, were like the RV park, and that it was a temporary situation where, because we had no active use, we let them store an enormous number of RVs on our land on a month-to-month basis. And I don't think there was any particular, they were hoping they could continue that,
Sure.
but it was not something they were entitled to, or there had been any long-term expectation of.
that's correct. And I would just add too, that also is not on our airport master plan. That's been identified for decades, including our latest master plan, just approved by the FAA a couple of years ago, to alter that particular area for aviation use and purposes, which is what this license at least will become.
And that was the only other tenant that we terminated was the RV.
The RV, and there was a small landscape company as well. So two non-aeronautical tenants right off Stair Road right there. The remaining general aviation tenants in that vicinity are right next to this particular site and across the airport have not come forward with any other concerns. In fact, that all of them have either long-term agreements with the airport on alternative sites or are working with us on growing their footprint in alternative sites as well. No different than what Beta is doing today.
Councilor Jay.
Can you speak? Tenants is one thing, but how about the resident?
Sure. So that's in relationship to the rezoning request that happened over the last year or so. That request has officially been denied by the subcommittee of the South Burlington Planning Commission, and is not in this vicinity at all. It's in fact on the very opposite end of the area, literally about a mile away from this site. I've worked with many of the neighbors, the leadership of the city of South Burlington, the planning commission members and the subcommittee members to really approach that in a different alternative format, meaning there are ways to help the neighbors, if you will, and be a good neighbor to that Chamberlain area, as well as still commit to properly and sustainably growing the airport to where we need it to be. Most importantly is that maintenance job on the conversation or the revision of maintenance job. But those things can happen together, and we're working with I would say a subgroup to really commit to how that can be presented differently, including per gap as well.
Okay, I've lost track. Do we have a motion yet? No. If so, Jeremy, is there something you wanted to say at this point, or you're just here if needed?
I'm just here if you have any questions. I guess I'd say that right now the area where this work would occur is not occupied by any tenants, and as the mayor stated, it allows Beta to continue preparatory work without having to demobilize and then remobilize in a few. All the work that they'll be doing is at their own risk. So if for some reason between now and then, the city doesn't approve their long-term ground lease, the work they'll have done will benefit the airport long-term, and the city isn't required to pay for it. So it feels like there isn't a lot of risk to the city in allowing Beta to continue to do this preparatory work on city property over the next few weeks.
Thank you, Jeremy. Are we ready for a motion? Councilor Jennings.
I approve this to recommend to the city council as indicated.
Thank you. Second by President Paul. Further discussion of 4.05. Seeing none, we will go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you. The rest of the airport team that's here for all that.
See you in an hour.
Okay, excellent. Good. 4.06 East Plant Wastewater Plant Outfall repair. PW item, and now we'll go back to just opening up to the board to ask questions if needed. How would the board like to proceed?
I will make the motion to take the action as recommended on board docs.
Thank you, Councilor McGee. Second by Councilor Janning. Further discussion? We'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. This brings us to a second DPW item, marketplace garage repair. And contract for structural repairs. Welcome, Jeff. How would the board like to proceed? President Paul.
Thanks. I'll make a motion to take the actions as recommended.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Councilor Hightower, you too, and Councilor McGee will go. Second. Councilor Hightower, any questions, further discussion? President Paul.
Just have one question. It's $20 more money. Just seems so just wondering doing the things that need to be done, but eventually this is going to catch up with us. Let's see.
Yep, this is, we appreciate that also. So the goal of this is really to put just enough into the marketplace garage to get us about a 5-year window, so we can start the planning process of what's next with that piece of land. And I've actually got $40,000 in that FY23 budget to pay for the beginning of that public outreach, visioning, imagining what goes on in that space. So.
Oh, we'll look forward to it. Not to say that I don't know what the cost of a new garage is, but I'm sure it's significant. Yes. Thank you. Thanks.
Further discussion.
What deal with the garages? What do they mean by
That's 4.08. Yes, that's being facetious, but the Lakeview College Street garage, really big focus on that. Sun will actually bring it to the downtown garage. And we're at 4.08 to place a stair tower in what's going to be the downtown north garage. Because that's deteriorated beyond the point that it can be repaired. So that'll be a whole new stair tower. And then again, in the future, how can we protect it better from the elements? It's a southwest exposure, it's getting a whole so we have a multi-layer approach here to getting these garages into a stable state going forward.
And the motion was
It's through at least working with the clerk treasurer's office to do a 5 to 7 year So I've actually budgeted a 6-year term with a 6% interest. You know, the budgets I've got my budget to cover the weeks that is yet to be finalized. Working closely with staff.
Normal date. What commission votes today?
These items actually aren't in their jurisdiction, they're in your jurisdiction. They don't have fiscal responsibility, so to speak.
But we did, to your point, Councilor Jang, we did present the marketplace condition assessment report and the short-term strategy to the commission last month.
And then we went to the two also. Yeah. Trying to spread the.
Okay, I think we do have a motion. We have a motion here, right? So if there's no further questions, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. 4.08, design, build, stair replacement for the Lakeview Garage Southwest Tower. We'll go to the board. How would you like to proceed? Thank you, Councilor Jennings. Is there a second for the motion?
Second.
Great, thank you, Councilor McGee. Second, further discussion? Seeing none, we will go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay, here we are at the 4.09 and so 4.09, 4.10 are the major budget resolutions. After quite a bit of discussion over numerous meetings, they're before you. It is my hope we're in place position for to the point Chairman Busher was making sooner. Certainly is always better. Hasn't always happened, but it is always better if the budget goes to the full council with recommendations from the Board of Finance. It's our hope that we will be able to secure those recommendations tonight. The floor is open for discussion.
I just wanted to
Yeah,
make one
please.
last comment. You may have noticed that there was a final version posted at 4:15 of this resolution. Despite my best efforts, we did find a mistake, and by we, I mean the talented DPW and Water Resources team, who realized that on page 5, on line 123, I referenced the 3 attached schedules for water and wastewater, but I had forgotten to attach them in my 25-page budget resolution. So the only change that was made was adding pages 24 and 25. And those are the private fire protection fee schedule that we saw when Megan presented, and the water and wastewater fixed charges and volumetric rate schedules. All of that was included in Megan's presentation, and I apologize, it was my error. It should have been in the first version, but that is the only thing that changed from the version that says final and the version that says final.
How would the board like to proceed? Are there further questions or ready for recommendation?
I have a suggestion.
Great, good.
In the interest of time, so the Board of Finance members are aware that, you know, when this comes to the council, that after discussing this with the CAO, that it seemed to make sense that we be able to combine items 4.11 to 4.15 in one motion. And in the interest of time, so we have a little bit more time with the other 2. I know that's out of order, but I'm happy to make a motion to move 4.11 to 4.15 as a slate. And I know Councilor McGee has agreed to do that when we get upstairs. So if if there's no objections to that, we could at least do that and focus the rest of our time on the other 2.
Thank you for that.
So that's a motion.
Okay, excellent. That is welcomed. We'll then go back to 4.09 and 4.10 after this. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councilor McGee. Discussion of, any discussion on 4.11 to 4.15?
My only, and I think we have extensively discussed this Burlington Police Department budget. Seems here on the resolution of about $700,000. I was just wondering, Mr. Mayor, you can talk about what would be the plan for the police?
What will be the plan with for the crisis response that could inspire? Wow. Sure, I'm happy to speak to that.
But that's.
I would suggest that we, just to clarify, just to make sure we're on the same page of what we're doing, we're the motion and the motion on the table that has been seconded is for 4.11 through 4.15. That none of the various actions contained with that really touch on that piece of it. That really be subsumed within 4.09. So I would suggest I'll speak to that when we get back to 4.09. Right. Okay. Excellent. Any further discussion of 4.11 through 4.15? Seeing none, we will go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Is there any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and so those are recommended. Now let's go back to 4.09 and I'll answer that question. Here's how we would like to proceed with this and how the budget has us proceeding, and it's actually a budget resolution that speaks to this is there is a gap between the fully funded model, the full bid that we've received proposal for the crisis response services as we went out to the public with, and after much discussion with various different stakeholders, and that is concerning. I have been in discussion for many months with state officials about the possibility of state closing some or all of that gap. And there's, I characterize it as strong interest from senior Agency for Human Services officials in doing that, either through appropriation, there are several sizable mental health related funding sources that are possible funding sources for this. There's also the possibility that much if not all of this activity could be eligible for direct kind of billing to Medicare, Medicaid. And given that, I appreciate your prior questions. Other counselors have expressed eagerness for this program to begin, and concern about this gap. I'm asking for a little bit more time for us to complete those conversations with the state and attempt to get this new program started without additional local funding unless necessary. If it is necessary, I understand there's interest in having that conversation. We'll be back. But at this point, I think it would not be prudent to take that step given the status of those state conversations. I've committed, if the budget resolutions pass as noted, as written, as before you, we will give you monthly updates on this effort from now into the fall. Keep you posted on how we're going with this to try to address what I think is a widely held sense of desire, urgency to see this program underway. So that's how we're proposing to handle it, Councilor Chang. I hope that's clear. Okay. Great, thank you. Any further discussion? I don't think we have a motion for 4.09 yet. So we did have a motion for the other four, but 09 and 10, which deals with the revenue side of the budget, we need motions for some. Councilor Jen.
I make the motion to approve the document of the city council, item as indicated.
4.09, great, thank you very much. Is there a second for that? President Paul seconds, thank you. Further discussion on 4.09? Seeing none, we will go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and very much welcome that unanimous recommendation of the budget. And I certainly, from my perspective, appreciate the months of engagement from the board on this item leading up to that. And, thank you, and let's in the months to come, we should do what I think we've done in many years, sort of regroup and ask a couple things about the process. People would like different in the future. But we can talk about that, but hopefully, thank you for getting to this recommendation tonight. 4.10 is the annual tax assessments, and would request a motion on this. I will note, hopefully people saw in the budget memo that although the municipal property taxes, there is some increase as we have used the full authority the voters have given us overall because of the school budget and because of changes, decisions made in Montpelier regarding the state education fund. All of the positive things in the budget that you just recommended, 4.09, are possible in a year when overall people will be seeing an overall decrease to the property taxes of about 4% here. You're now projecting. So in that context, do we have any motion? Are we ready for a motion on 4.1? President Paul.
Since I know it's not the most fun thing to do, I'll make that motion and take the action to recommend the council adopt the attached resolution.
Thank you, President Paul. A little more fun in years that we know. There's the overall picture looks pretty good. Second by Councilor Jang. Discussion of 4.10. Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And thank you for that recommendation, and thank you for the collaboration tonight to complete the lengthy agenda with 8 minutes to spare. Without objection, we are adjourned at 5:22 p.m. and I believe we will reconvene upstairs in 5:30.
8 more minutes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gonna go get dinner. We'll reconvene upstairs at 5:30 for the expected executive session. We'll have us coming back down here.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So.